Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a video for the Daily Marker Pop-Up Color Challenge. Kathy Rakusin of the Daily Marker has had some other 30-day coloring challenges in the past, but in that time between the 30 days she's decided to do some pop-up challenges. And so this one just lasts over the weekend. And the main focus, or the theme of this pop-up challenge, is using lines. And she's encouraged you to draw your own lines, to trace things, to add lines, and it made me think of this stencil from Simon Says Stamp. It is the Ocean Wave stencil, and I've used this quite a few times on my channel. I've used it with embossing paste for a shark card for Newton's Nook. I've used it with stenciling, and this is actually the same whale that I'm going to be using today from Gerda Steiner Designs. And so I like being able to use the same material, the same tool to get a lot of different looks. So I'm going to be using it again today to help me create my lines. You could just create wavy lines and you wouldn't need someone to make the pattern for you, but if you're feeling a little apprehensive, going to your stencils would be a great way to participate in this challenge. I'm tracing the stencil with my tuxedo black marker, and I'm using this because I'm going to be doing some Copic coloring. I decided to turn the stencil. When I was holding the stencil horizontal for the most clear wave pattern, I found that it was really hard to bring my marker along it. And I think that part of what's going on there, and I've heard this about drawing in general, but also it kind of applies to Copic colors as well, that some people like to pull the marker when making lines and some people like to push the marker. And so basically with the marker, drawing, you want to either start at the bottom of the page and make your lines up, or start at the top of the page and make your lines down. Kind of is just like a personal preference thing. With Copic markers, it may be that you like to flick up, or you like to flick downwards. And so if you're having a little bit of trouble, if you feel like your lines are not turning out the way you want, I would just kind of experiment with that. Maybe it's you're kind of making it more difficult and you need to turn the page, and that will help you make a little bit straighter, more confident lines. I found it helped me. So, just try to throw out any tips that I can. And I'm going to go over all the lines on this stencil, and it's moving around a lot. So what I'm doing is covering with my hand the plastic pieces nearest to what I'm tracing to sort of hold them in place, because I don't want to get too much movement. You can't obviously erase this pen, so once that line is down, it's stuck. And so I'm just trying to get as smooth of lines as I can, but as you'll see in a second, they are certainly not perfect. There's parts where I didn't do a whole continuous line, and so you see those little extra bits of pen in the middle of a line, and that's where I lifted my marker up in between. So what I'm going to do is keep going in with this marker and make some of the lines thicker and thinner. I like this because it adds some personalization. It allows me to create some thicker lines, which makes Copic coloring a little bit easier. It's a little easier to stay in the lines later, although actually I have a tip for how to help if you're a kind of person who colors outside the lines a little bit. Something similar that I've talked about in my channel before. But I'm going to just continue to work with this. The tuxedo black marker works well with Copics, but I've heard so do Sharpies. Yet Sharpies don't come in the brush tip, so what's kind of nice about the tuxedo black marker is on the other side that I'm not using is a brush tip. So if you're interested in a brush tip that works with Copics, that's just a suggestion there. I do like the way that the tuxedo black marker feels, and the brush tip is excellent for going around fussy cut images. To do my coloring here, I have BG 72 and 78 because I'm trying to create an ocean background, and I'm doing sort of a blue, green, teal ocean today. I am starting with the 72, and I'm flicking it outwards from the edges of these shapes, and I'm not going to completely cover the center. I'm going to leave some bits white. And the reason that I want to do that is because I will lay on the darker color and then come back with the lighter color. And in order for the center to stay as light as possible, you want to not go over it too many times with the ink. So ideally the center might only get 1 or 2 coats of ink, whereas the parts that I colored initially, like I put BG 72 down and I went over it again, it's going to probably get more like 3 or 4 layers. So just a tip for keeping your lightest area a little bit lighter. If you know where it is, try not to go over it until the very last time you use the light marker. It's a little bit imprecise here just because, these are abstract shapes. There is no particular light falling on them. The only thing that I'm trying to do to keep it consistent is to make the edges or the points darker. And there are two parts of the stencil that I'm coloring. Right now, the areas that I'm coloring are the negative parts of the stencil, i.e. where if you were to just put ink over the stencil, the ink would be going. And then the part that's still white here is the part that would have been covered in plastic, the mask part of the stencil. And so I'm going to color that in a second set of blue-greens that's lighter. So taking out my Copic hex chart from Sandy Allnock, and I find this to be super helpful. The number system is great, and I use it a lot of the time, but sometimes I have gaps in my colors, and so I like to just kind of get a feel for even if I don't have the marker that comes next in line with the number system, what other markers I could use. And the hex chart helps with that. Also, even when I use the number system or the hex chart, a lot of times I'll just test the colors on a little bit of scrap paper first so I get an idea for how they're going to blend. So I'm actually going to use 3 colors in this second part of the stencil. I'm going to use BG10, BG34, and BG13. I find the gap between 10 and 13 to be a little too much, and as you can see on the Copic hex chart, the BG34 kind of bridges that gap a little bit. And so I'm going to use it in that way today. And I'm just going to cover the very lightest areas, or basically what is going to be the center of the card, in that BG10. So I, went over a whole wash of BG10 in the area. Then I went to the darkest color, which was the BG13, pulled that on the edges, then blended it out with the BG13, and one last coat of BG10. What was really nice is because I colored the lighter color second, when the lighter color wasn't inside the lines, because that lighter color is in those thinner lines. If a little bit of the BG10 or 13 got in the areas that I colored with the BG72 or 78, you couldn't even see it because it's a lighter color. So I tend to kind of play with that advantage a little bit and color my darker colors first when I know that I might be getting outside the lines. Sometimes it's also better to color with your lighter color first. I guess either way it could work. But when you're coloring 2 different colors next to each other, getting outside the lines, or, a dark and a light, doesn't matter as much. Anyway, I'm not sure if that was helpful, but I'm going to move on to coloring these whales. They are from Gerda Steiner Designs Heavy Friends stamp set. And I'm going to color the 3 whales, but I'm going to color some of them with the W markers and some of them with the C markers. There's a lot of different grays. I have the W's and the C's with Copics because to me they are very different. The T's and N's, as far as I understand, are pretty similar, and so I don't see a reason to get them, because I can achieve most effects I want with either the C's or the W's. But I did want to kind of show you the difference between them. The W's have a little bit more brown in them. They're definitely warmer, hence the name warm gray. And I generally like to color animals with the W's. But whales and ocean animals are a little bit different. You can definitely get a lot more cool grays. Like if I was going to color a dolphin, I'd use the cool grays. But generally the W's are pretty good because they give that sort of that sense of warmth, which animals have, living things have. Whereas like a robot, I would color that with the C's because they don't need that sense of warmth. And in fact, it kind of plays up their metallic look to use the C markers. But with the whales, like I said, you can kind of go either way. So what I decided to do was color 1 whale in the cool grays and 2 whales in the warm gray, or the other way. I just colored, 2 in one and 1 in the other, because I was going to use 3, the rule of odds, things like, if you're going to make a group of things, you should make a group of 3. And so I'll have 3 whales, but I'll use both because both make sense for whales, and it just adds a little bit of interest to the paper. So it was 2 cool whales, 2 sea whales. And I'm going to make this a birthday card because in the Gerda Steiner Designs Heavy Friends stamp set, there is a saying, "Hope your birthday is a splash." And so I really want to tie that birthday theme into this, and so I stamped out some birthday hats from another Gerda Steiner Designs stamp set, and now I am going to also color an area for the sentiment. I wanted to use orange because orange will contrast nicely with the teal. They're opposite on the color wheel. And so I'm using YR65 and 68, plus I'm using an E marker, which is E97, which is labeled deep orange. And so it gives me a little bit more contrast. And then when I go to color the birthday hats, I can color the whole birthday hat in the YR68 and then go in with the E97, which is a darker marker, and just color right over it. And I can color right outside the lines because I am going to trim them up. So it kind of goes back to that thing I was saying earlier about when you use a really dark color and a really light color. If you think about which one to color first, it can save you some time with coloring. So now I'm going to assemble all of the pieces. I had cut out that orange banner by putting the little triangle in the end of it. I usually cut down the center and then cut from the sides. I find that makes it easier to get a more even coverage. And I am going to assemble the whales, and I thought about trying to layer them all together, but I found that when I tried that it covered too much of the whale that was in the back, and so I decided to put a grouping of 2 and then 1 up off to the top, and I'm going to have them all starting at a little bit of different space just to give the card a little bit more of a sense of movement. And I want one whale to be a little bit more prominent, as if maybe that is in fact the birthday whale, and so I'm going to pop that up on foam tape. I am using multimedia matte from Ranger to glue down the first 2 whales and their hats, but I had popped up the sentiment on some foam tape, and I'm going to do the same thing with this last whale, but I want to make sure that his birthday hat is in line with him, so I am just gluing on the very edge of the hat first, and then I'm laying on the foam tape such that a small, very thin piece of it will extend into the hat area and make sure everything stays attached nicely and that doesn't fall off. Generally, multimedia matte is really, really strong adhesive, so I'm not super worried about it falling off, but I just think adding that bit of foam tape behind it gives it a little added security. And so once I did that, I am finished with my card for today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you are interested in some coloring challenges, please check out the link to the Daily Marker Pop-Up Color Challenge in the description box below. And I'll also leave you some links to the products that I used. If you're interested in more crafty videos, you can also subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.